and a very warm welcome to the Analyst dated 1st July 2026, brought to you by Vajiram and Ravi, wherein we'll be looking into the 6th set of current affairs articles along with the mains value addition article, and the handout of this very discussion has been pinned in the comment section below for your future reference. Now, beginning with the analysis section, as Digital India Mission has completed 11 years, so in this particular backdrop, we'll try and understand the success as well as the limitations that we are facing when it comes to effective realization of the idea of smart governance as well as digitally empowered citizens in India. Moving on to the second topic, herein we'll try and understand the entire controversy related to the three-language formula. We'll try and understand that why there's a need to enforce this particular policy, what are the challenges in this respect, and what more needs to be done. Then we'll be looking into a mains value addition article. Therein we'll be discussing a case study with respect to fiscal federalism. And lastly, we will be covering the 4 prelim pointers wherein the value addition has been done keeping in mind the prelim stage of the examination. So stay tuned. Now, beginning with the first topic, which is dealing with the Digital India Mission. This particular topic you can associate with GS paper 2 as well as GS paper 4, wherein you have this topic of e-governance. Now, why are we discussing about the Digital India Mission? The reason being, this particular mission has completed 11 years. So it was launched way back in 2015. Now, when it comes to this particular mission, all these data facts that are written here, you can use it to highlight the success of this particular mission. Let's explore more about this particular mission. So as we discussed that it was launched way back in 2015, and the main objective was that to use technology to make life easier for every Indian citizen. And when it comes to its implementing agency, so this particular mission is being implemented by Department of Electronics and Information Technology. Now, when it comes to this particular mission, it has 9 major pillars. Let's look into all the pillars one by one. The first pillar is talking about improving the broadband connectivity, especially in the rural areas. And for realization of this particular idea, the government is always, already running the BharatNet program, wherein we intend to connect 2 lakh gram panchayats with the high broadband connectivity. So effective internet connectivity we are planning to provide at the grassroots level by connecting the gram panchayats. Then pillar 2 talks about universal access to mobile connectivity, and in this respect, when it comes to India, the broadband internet user subscriber base has increased to around 106 crore by the end of March 2026. Then the third pillar talks about the public internet access program. So in this respect, we have put in place around 6.5 lakh common service centers at the rural areas, and we also have 1.6 lakh post offices which are now delivering the e-governance related initiatives as well as banking related services. Okay. Then the fourth pillar is about e-governance, which talks about reforming the government through technology. And in this respect, we have Gati Shakti portal, which intends to connect different ministry, and we ensure that the money is not wasted. Earlier, what used to happen, let's suppose the road department, created a particular road, and then the water department, sanitation department, they'll come and they'll dig this road to put in place the pipes or the drainage pipes. Now, this used to lead to wastage of public money. So, in order to ensure that there is effective coordination between the different ministries and the departments when it comes to infrastructure creation, we created the Gati Shakti portal. Another example that we have is of DigiLocker. And as you can see in this data point, that we have around 70 plus crore DigiLocker users. Now, instead of maintaining the papers and, when it comes to different government documents, PAN, Aadhaar, etc., you can store all your data in the DigiLocker and you can access it anywhere. Then the fifth pillar talks about e-Kranti, which talks about electronic delivery of services. So in this respect, when you talk about the healthcare, we have the e-Sanjeevani initiative, wherein a person who is living in rural areas, that person can also get the good or high quality medical facility from a doctor which is situated in the urban areas, okay, by using telemedicine. Then we have the e-courts, which is enabling online tracking of the case and the judgments. Then the sixth pillar talks about information for all. So in this respect, you can talk about the My Government platform, wherein the government tells you that what it is planning to do, and it is also taking the feedback from you when it comes to the different initiatives. Okay, like for example, before the budget on the My Government platform, the government would be asking that what do you think should be incorporated in the budget, what should be the sector that would be focused upon. So your feedback, your ideas would also be taken into consideration through this particular platform. Then we have the seventh pillar that talks about electronics manufacturing, and in this respect, with the help of the production linked incentive scheme, India has done great in this respect. As you can see today, India is the world's second largest mobile phone manufacturer, and the electronic production in India has increased from roughly 2 lakh crore in financial year 2014-15 to around 12 lakh crore by the end of March 2026. Then the eighth pillar talks about IT for jobs. And in this respect, you will be happy to know this, that India is home to around 2100 plus global capability centers. When it comes to the global capability centers, what are these? So these are basically the offshore units of multinational companies which are being set up in India, and they are contributing immensely to the internal business of the MNCs. Like for example, they are doing innovation, they are improving the product. Okay, they are creating skilled job in the domain of artificial intelligence, cloud computing, etc. So through the setting up of the global capability centers, we are able to generate more and more skilled jobs for our youth, and this helps in realizing the demographic dividend. Then the ninth pillar is early harvest programs. So early harvest programs basically talks about the quick impact initiatives. For example, biometric attendance that we have incorporated when it comes to MG Narega. Now the bill has been, the MG Narega has been replaced by the VBG Ramji Act. Then we are providing public Wi-Fi hotspot under the PM Vani scheme, wherein the idea is that a local shopkeeper or a tea stall would be providing you the Wi-Fi services at a very low affordable cost, because maybe in the rural areas it is not possible for a household to spend more than 300 rupees to get a data pack. Okay, so when it comes to the internet services, it would be provided to you via these local shopkeepers, tea stalls in a form of sachet. Okay. Then we have digital learning tools, SMS based weather alerts are being provided to the farmers. So we have various programs which are having quick impact. Now, other success that you can quote is that how we have witnessed a phenomenal rise in the use of UPI. In financial year 2016-17, as you can see, the total transaction that used to take place, the value of transaction was around 2 crore. Now, approximately 24,000 crore transaction is being carried out by using the UPI. Then we have effectively exploited the JAM Trinity. You can see the phenomenal rise in Jan Dhan accounts, Aadhaar enrollment, and the mobile internet connectivity. And all these data, as you can see, we have picked up from the PIB. And when it comes to UPI, you will be happy to know this, that now these UPI services are now extended to around 9 countries. Cambodia has become the latest to enable seamless UPI payments for the travelers. And there are other countries with which we are having the negotiation when it comes to adoption of UPI. Then when it comes to the data cost in India, as you can see that how effectively it has gone down over a period of time. In 2014, for 1 GB data, we have to pay around more than 300 rupees. But now in 2022, you have to pay less than 10 rupees for 1 GB data. Now, what are the other significance of e-governance? Having understood the different pillars, let's explore the other dimensions when it comes to e-governance. First of all, it helps in improving the inter-departmental coordination. Here you can give the example of PM Gati Shakti portal, which helps in effective coordination among 15 ministry for infrastructure planning. Now, it would not happen that, okay, the road department has put in place the road and now another department, water or sanitation department is coming and it is digging the road again. So the wastage of public money that used to happen earlier, that would not happen now. It has helped in improving the efficiency when it comes to governance. So here you can give the example of government e-marketplace, wherein whatever procurement is being done by the government departments and ministries, that is done in a transparent, efficient and paperless manner. I hope you are able to recall that when we studied the MSME topic, therein we read that through this particular platform, we are ensuring that almost 25% of whatever item is being procured by any government department or ministry needs to be procured from the MSMEs. Then, to enhance the market access for the MSMEs or the small players, the government has created this e-commerce platform, that is open network for digital commerce. Now, when it comes to the e-commerce platforms like Flipkart or Amazon, they have access to wider consumer base. Why? Because people in every corner of India, they are using and they are ordering the items by using Amazon and Flipkart. Now, these small players, they are finding it difficult to compete with this e-commerce platform, because they can't create their own e-commerce platform. So the government has created this e-commerce platform for these small players. So that is how it is enabling the small players or the MSMEs to effectively connect with a wider consumer base. Then it is helping us in improving the accountability of the government also. So you have CP grams, centralized public grievance redressal and monitoring system, and to further refine the CP grams, we have created Samadhan Didi. I hope you are able to recall that Samadhan Didi, we discussed in the previous analyst discussion, that it is an AI powered tool wherein if let's suppose I have some concerns or some grievances regarding a public ministry or a department. Now I just mention my grievance, I am not mentioning the ministry, but this Samadhan Didi would be asking me certain few questions, and through whatever answers I'll be giving, Samadhan Didi have to figure out that this grievance pertains to which government ministry or department. Okay, so that is how we are promoting accountability, and Samadhan Didi has been linked with the Bhashini app also, which supports more than 22 plus languages. So that ways we are ensuring that when it comes to the public grievance redressal mechanism, it is being guided by the idea of multilingualism. Okay, so that is how we are improving the accountability mechanisms as well. Then it is helping us realize the idea of participatory governance. So here you can give the example of mygovernment.in platform, which enables the government to establish an effective link with the citizens, what the citizens are actually thinking. Then it is helping us improve the accessibility of the services. So here you can talk about Telemanas, which is providing 24/7 mental health related counseling services through a helpline number. Then you can also mention about the Umang app, wherein we have expanded the number of services that were provided through this particular app. Earlier 166 services were available. Now more than 2000 services are provided via this particular app. Okay, so through one app I can avail different services. It's not like to get one service I have to log into another app, then to another app. So that is how it is making the governance more and more accessible to the people. Now, having understood the pillars and the significance of e-governance, let's try and understand the limitations that we are still witnessing when it comes to effective realization of the idea of smart governance. What is smart governance? S stands for simple, M stands for moral, A accountable, R responsive, T transparent. Now, the first challenge that we have is the huge digital divide which is still prevalent in India. So if you go by the Oxfam Inequality Report of 2022, it rightly points out that there is a gender divide when it comes to this digital divide. So when it comes to women, they constitute only 1/3 of the internet users in India. And if you go by the latest Internet in India Report 2024, which is released by Internet and Mobile Association of India, merely 51% of the rural population is not able to access internet. Okay, so that simply means that only 49% of them are able to access internet. Rest 51% are still not able to access the internet. Whereas if you look at the figures in the urban areas, it is more than or roughly around 67%. So there is a huge digital divide when it comes to the urban and rural areas and on the basis of gender also. Then another problem is with respect to digital literacy. Now, in this respect, again, the Internet and Mobile Association of India 2021 report points out that 34% of the India's population know how to actually use the different websites or the different social media platforms. Why this is problematic? Because if only 34% of the people know how to access the e-government related services, so how are we going to make the life easier for every citizen of India? So that is a challenge. And the people who don't know effectively that what is going to be the implication of their digital footprint, that is also problematic, because then they become more and more vulnerable to the cyber stalkers or the cyber criminals. And especially this is the case with the children. Okay, therein we understand this thing that the new generation know how to use social media and different platforms. They are very tech savvy, but they still lack the understanding that what could be the implication of the digital footprints that they are leaving on these social media platforms, and that makes them more and more vulnerable to cyber criminals, okay, to online cyber frauds, to cyber stalking, to online sexual abuse materials, etc. Then cyber frauds is on a rise. I am not saying this, RBI is saying this, and this is something which you can very well understand through this particular chart, that how the numbers were quite less when you look at the figures of 2019 and 20. But if you look at the figures of 2023-24, the frauds I have mentioned in crores. So cyber frauds are on a rise, and that is the reason you must have seen this, that our parents, they don't prefer to use these smartphones. They are comfortable with their feature phone, that button wala phone. Why? Because they feel that the moment they enter their bank details on these smartphones, it might be exposed to cyber criminals who are engaged in these cyber frauds. And the cyber frauds are on a rise. Why? Because of lack of digital literacy also. Then there are privacy concerns also. At one end, we are promoting the idea of digital India. But have we put in place an effective digital security framework? There are questions being raised with respect to digital security framework that we have put in place. Why? Because a US-based cybersecurity firm, which is named as Resecurity, pointed out that around 81 crore Indians' Aadhaar card details are already available on the dark web. I am sure that you are able to relate with this idea of dark web. What is dark web? So it is a part of the deep web. Before the deep web, you have the surface web. So surface web is whatever you are able to search through normal search engines like Google, Mozilla, Google Chrome, etc. Deep web is wherein the information is accessible, but you need to have the password or the user ID. For example, my financial records, my health records, you cannot access. Okay, so for that you need the username and the password. And one subset of this deep web is dark web or dark net. To use this, you need to use the onion router. Okay, so layer after layers websites are there, and it is very difficult for the authorities to effectively track or monitor the transactions which are taking place via these dark web. And this is the reason it becomes difficult to effectively tackle the instances of drug trafficking, child trafficking, which takes place through this dark web. Okay, so this is problematic because if these many Indians' data, Aadhaar card details are there on the dark web, by using this information, it might be the case that the companies would be coming up with targeted advertisements for me. Okay, and that is how they are shaping my decision when it comes to consumption. And this data could also be used for political purposes, okay, for creating echo chambers for us. Then previously there were allegations that the data which is available on the CoWIN platform that has gone leaked. So such instances raise concern with respect to the security of the data that I'm providing on the government platforms and the government website. Nowadays, it has become all the more necessary that you provide the Aadhaar card details for availing any government service. But the question is whether my details are actually safe in the hands of the government or not. So that in turn disincentivizes the citizens to be a part when it comes to this digital revolution. Then another problem is the user experience. Majority of the content which is available, it is available in English language, okay. multilingualism support is not still that much available. Although we have created Bhashani app, but it has limitations. It is only able to support around 22 plus languages. But in India, we have around 121 languages which are spoken by majority of the Indians in India. So these many languages are not supported, so that is a problem. So we need to exploit the potential of this Bhashani app, and we need to make sure that it supports majority of the languages. Another problem is that the Divyangs are not able to effectively assess the e-governance related services. Why? Because majority of the websites, they lack a voice-based interface or a reading support. Okay, so that is a problem. Last problem is the cost factor. Now, although when it comes to the government, we are giving a push to this digital India revolution. But you need to understand that you are dealing with humongous amount of data. For that, you need to put in place effective security infrastructure. Okay, so the software needs to be updated on a regular basis. And when it comes to the technology, you know that how frequently it is evolving. But the government budget does not evolve so rapidly. So when it comes to the government departments, it is a very costly affair for them, because to handle so much of data, they need to constantly invest when it comes to high-tech software. So that is another problem. Lastly, what needs to be done so that we effectively realize the idea of smart governance? First and foremost, we need to address this digital divide. I hope majority of you would be able to recall that why I'm talking about this BharatNet program, because an RTI was filed, and via that RTI, we got to know that when it comes to the target that we have set under the BharatNet program, which intends to do away with the digital divide that we have between the urban and the rural areas, only 45% of the connections were active. Okay, so we have not been able to ensure last mile internet connectivity, especially when it comes to the Gram Panchayats. So effective implementation of the BharatNet program is the need of the hour. Then we need to enhance the cyber security framework. For that, what we need to do is we need to ensure effective implementation of the DPDP Act, that is Digital Personal Data Protection Act. And under this particular act, the government has also come up with the rules. So when it comes to this particular act, it provides you the right to access the information. You can correct any information when it comes to your personal data, which is available with the different websites. Then you would be provided with the timely response if you request that any data needs to be raised or any correction needs to be made. The response needs to be provided by the social media or the digital media intermediaries within the 90 days. And another important feature that has been incorporated under this particular act is that if there is any data breach, then it is the responsibility of these data intermediaries that they inform you in this respect. And under this particular act, as I told you that the rules have been created, and under those particular rules, the Digital Protection Board of India has been created, which would be ensuring the monitoring and the compliance of this particular act. Then, to protect the humongous data that we are collecting from the citizens, we need to exploit this evolving technology, that is quantum key distribution. Now, this quantum technology had two major aspects. One is superimposition, the other one is entanglement. Now, when it comes to the conventional computers, they deal in bits. So, at one time, it could be 0 or it could be 1. But when you talk about the quantum technology, it deals in qubits. It processes the data in qubits. So, if I toss a coin in air, so in air, in mid-air, the coin can have head also, tail also. So, just like that, the qubit can have 0 also, and at the same time, it can be 1 also. Okay, so this is the property of superimposition. The another property is entanglement. Entanglement, I hope you would have watched the Judwa movie, wherein if you hit one person, the reflection, the same thing would be reflected when it comes to the other twin. So that is the property that you can see in the quantum technology also. If you try to interfere with one of the particle, then the same impact would be witnessed when it comes to the other particle. Okay, because they are entangled with each other. So this makes our communication more and more secure. So to enhance the security of the data that we are collecting from the citizens, when it comes to the JAM Trinity, these technologies needs to be capitalized upon. Then we need to promote the digital literacy. For that, the effective implementation of PM Disha is the need of the hour. And we need to ensure that there is inclusive digital access. For that, we need to create voice-based interface, okay? And the software needs to promote, or it needs to support around 121 languages which are majorly spoken across India. Then, in order to ensure that whatever data we are collecting that is secure, we need to align our DPDP Act in alignment with the principles which are reflected under the European Union General Data Protection Regulation. So under this particular regulation, they have effectively segregated that what is the standard data and what is sensitive data. For example, the data related to my biometric details or my health or my financial details needs to be provided with enhanced protection. So that kind of segregation has been done. Then it has clearly offered the basis, that is the ground on which you can actually do the processing of the data. So effectively clearly listed, effectively they have listed down that on what all grounds you can do legitimate processing of the data when it comes to the citizens' personal data. Then it has restricted the cross-border transfers, especially in the countries which lack adequate data protection. But when it comes to the DPDP Act, when it comes to India, we have not put in place a very strong data localization rule. Okay, so we need to align the DPDP Act with this EU General Data Protection Regulation. That would go a long way in ensuring that the governance in India is easy, effective, and economic. And ultimately, it would also enable us to realize the idea of digital empowerment of citizens of India. That's all that we have to know when it comes to this particular topic. As you can see, UPSC has asked a question when it comes to e-governance, and every year you will see that there would be one or the other question related to e-governance. So based on the discussion that we have, I have framed a practice question for you people. So do practice this particular question. And with this, let's move on to the next topic. Now, the next article is dealing with the controversy which is related to the 3-language formula. This particular topic you can associate with GS paper 2, that is issues related to education in India. Now, why this controversy has emerged recently? The reason being that CBSE has introduced the 3rd language from class 6th onwards. And the experts are pointing out that how this introduction of 3-language formula is going, or it is in contradiction with the ideas which are outlined in the National Education Policy of 2020. Let's try and understand. Now, when it comes to this National Education Policy, when it comes to the STEM field, that is mathematics, science, and even the legal education, therein this NAP underlines the importance of English language, and therein it is not considering English as a foreign language. It is not clubbing it with other foreign languages, for example, French or Spanish. But when it comes to this 3-language formula, therein the NAP takes another route. Herein, it clearly states that the 2 languages needs to be native to India, and herein it considers English to be as a foreign language. This is the core of the entire controversy related to this 3-language formula. Because when it comes to the STEM field, therein you are not considering English as a foreign language, but when it comes to this 3-language formula, you are considering English as a foreign language. So in a way, you are forcing the southern states, the students who are getting the education in southern states, that one language that you have to take is Hindi somewhere, because in the southern states, one would be their mother tongue, one would be the English language, and the another language more or less you are trying to impose Hindi. That is the concern raised by the southern states in this respect. Now, what CBSE has done recently, so it has introduced this 3-language formula from class 6th onwards. And when it comes to the 3 languages, out of these 3 languages, we all know 2 needs to be the languages which are native to India. And in effect, it is considering that English is a foreign language. Now, what would be the implication of this? Let's suppose a child has taken French as a second language along with English. So in a way, you are forcing that child that you forego this French language and If you want to continue with English language, you have to take some other native Indian language. Now, out of these two native Indian languages, one would be the mother tongue language. The another language he might not be aware of. That would be entirely new to that particular student. So imagine the academic burden that we are creating upon the students right from class 6th. Now, when it comes to the backlash that the CBSE faced with respect to this particular decision, so it has stated that, okay, from class 6 onwards, we are going to impose this 3-language formula. But to reduce the academic burden when it comes to the students who are studying in class 7th, 8th and 9th, what CBSE has stated that you need to take only one additional Bharatiya language if you have taken English as one of the language. And when it comes to the third language, when it comes to the student who is currently studying in class 10th, therein it has stated that it would not be tested in their examination. Maybe an internal evaluation kind of thing would be done, and this would not get reflected in their board result. Now, let's try and understand that what is the rationale of this 3-language formula. The first reason being that it helps in effective cognitive development, and this is something which the UNESCO also supports. If we teach the child in its mother tongue, then it is easier for the child to effectively grasp the content that is being taught to that particular student, and this would help us in improving the learning outcomes. Especially this would be the case when it comes to the student who are from scheduled tribes, because for them it is very difficult to understand the foreign languages, or for them understanding the English language is also a problem. So if we teach them in the mother tongue, this would help us in improving the learning outcomes, especially when it comes to the ST students. Then it would help us in national integration. How come? If I'm learning some other language, this would make me aware about the diverse culture that we have across India. And if, let's suppose, I'm learning Tamil as a language, being a North Indian, when I go to South India, it would be easier for me to communicate with the public there. So that is how we are trying to foster the cultural understanding, Ek Bharat Shresth Bharat. Then, if you are learning diverse languages, you will have wider career opportunities also. You can get a job as a translator, okay? When it comes to the large language models, we know that it is performing the work of translation, but it is not that much effective when it comes to humans. So in this globalized era, if you learn different languages, you can get effectively a better job opportunity in other countries also. If, let's suppose, 2 native languages I choose and 1 language I choose, that is French. So I can effectively get a job in France. So it is going to enhance the career opportunities. Then it would also help us in preserving the indigenous languages, because as highlighted by the UNESCO in its report, that India has nearly 197 endangered languages. And if you go by the Scheme for Protection and Preservation of Endangered Languages, the scheme is run by the government for preservation of the endangered languages. It has identified that 117 languages are currently endangered in India. That means the number of people who used to speak this language, that number is going down. So by promoting this idea of 3-language formula, we are also trying to preserve the rich linguistic diversity which India has. Lastly, it would help the parents to contribute when it comes to their child's education. I hope majority of you would have watched the English Winglish movie of Sri Devi. When it comes to this English Winglish movie, what happened in that movie? The daughter of the female character used to disrespect her mother. Why? Because she was not well versed in English. Now, if we teach the students when it comes to their mother tongue, that way the parents would also be actively engaging when it comes to their child's study. And that way the child would start learning that they need to respect their parents also. Okay, so this is going to enhance the parental engagement when it comes to their children's studies. Now, what are the challenges in this respect? First and the foremost is the political resistance that we are seeing from majorly the southern states, especially Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Kerala, and even the West Bengal also. They think that this 3-language formula is a mechanism to impose Hindi on them. So that is the reason they are vehemently opposing this particular idea. Another problem is that when you go by the Niti Aayog 2026 report, that is school education system in India, it has clearly pointed out that more than 1 lakh schools in India are having just 1 teacher. Now, in this scenario, you're talking about hiring more teachers and imparting the proficiency when it comes to different languages. Let's deal with the basic issues. In 1 lakh schools, you have just one teacher. And this report, also points out another troubling fact that merely 10 to 15% of the teachers in the government schools, they score above 60% in the subject they teach. So we are not able to give effective education when it comes to these subjects like science, mathematics, the Hindi, English, okay, the social studies. You're talking about introducing more languages. Already you have shortage of teachers. How are you going to ensure that you have teachers which can teach 121 languages? Because these are the main languages which are spoken by more than 10,000 Indians in India, as highlighted by the census 2011. How are we going to ensure this availability of qualified teachers who can give this language-based education? That is a problem. Another problem is shortage of learning material. Now, when it comes to CBSE, earlier it has stated that we would be enforcing this 3-language formula from the academic year of 2029-30. But suddenly it stated that from this year, we are going to enforce this. That was the reason in this year itself, Supreme Court asked the CBI that you tell us that what is the logistic preparedness that you have done in this respect. Because clearly we can see that you don't have the learning material available in different languages. So on what grounds you have taken this decision that we are going to enforce this 3-language formula this year? So that again is a challenge. Then it is going to increase the academic burden. So in this respect, the parents as well as the teacher as well as the students, they have pointed out that how this is going to adversely affect when it comes to the students who are studying in class 10th standard. And nobody is talking about the adverse impact that it is going to have on the physical as well as the mental health of the child. Nowadays, in this competitive world, parents are putting undue pressure on the child that you have to perform effectively or you have to perform well when it comes to the academics. Already the child is not getting that much of time that he can go on the playground and play. Now we are increasing the number of subjects that they have to learn. So don't you think so it is going to negatively impact their physical health as well as their mental health? Because now they will be left with less amount of time that they can utilize for play, okay, or for sports activities. Then the cost of implementation is going to be huge, because if you want to move in this particular direction, you need to come up with effective learning material, you need to make necessary changes in the academic curriculum, you need to hire teachers, you need to invest in teacher training, and you need to adopt new technologies, okay, which can create the learning material in different languages. So it is a costly affair. Now what needs to be done? First and foremost, we need to make sure that the logistics are ready. So you need to come up with the learning material in different languages. For that, we can leverage the technology. For example, Bhashini app, we studied right now that how it is supporting more than 22 plus languages. We need to make sure that this app supports more than 22 plus languages, and this app could be used to come up with learning material in different languages. Then you need to invest in teacher training. Only then we will be able to address this learning gap, which might emerge between the students who are studying in government schools as well as compared to the students who are learning in the private schools. Because the private schools, they would be able to effectively implement this particular 3-language formula. But what about the students who are getting the education in the government schools? So for that, the government need to come forward and it need to invest in the teacher training. Then we need to be guided by the idea of cooperative federalism. So the center and the states, they should make use of platforms or the institutional mechanisms like the Interstate Council, like the Niti Aayog, Team India, for effectively resolving the concerns which the 2 levels of government have, and they needs to be guided by the consensus-based governance approach. Then we need to incorporate flexibility dimension. After all, it should be an individual choice of the student that whether he wants to learn a different language or not. So we need to let the child exercise that particular choice. And flexibility dimension also implies that we should be implementing this 3-language policy only in those regions wherein you have the learning material available in different languages and you have the teachers. Okay, requisite numbers of teachers are available. In those regions, we can, start this as a pilot-based project and see that how it helps in improving the learning outcomes. Based on that, you can replicate this model across India. Then we need to be guided by UNESCO multilingual education guidance. So in simple terms, UNESCO says this, that before you implement this 3-language formula, what you need to do is, you need to carry out a survey. You need to look into the socio-linguistic profile and the education profile of children. Simply saying that in this particular region, we need to look into that what are the major languages which are spoken. Let's suppose there are 4 languages which are majorly spoken. So accordingly, we can hire the teachers. That okay, we need to hire teachers in respect to these 4 languages. And in this respect, when you are redesigning the academic curriculum, we need to involve the parents, the children, indigenous people when it comes to designing the curriculum. Then we need to be guided by the idea of balanced multilingualism. It simply says that why are we trying to impose Hindi on the student who is studying in southern India? Let's make it reciprocal language learning. Let's make it mandatory that a student who is studying in North India, he has to learn maybe a southern language or a tribal language. And the same thing then would be welcomed by the southern states also. So this reciprocal language learning is something that we need to promote. This would enable us to strengthen the cultural understanding among the children. Now, if you want that a child should be incentivized to come forward and learn a particular language, what you can do is you can link language with employability. That is what the Odisha government is doing. For appearing in Odisha Civil Services examination, you need to be proficient when it comes to Odia language. So if you link the language with the employability, that is a mechanism through which the students would be incentivized to come forward and learn different languages instead of going with a top-down approach. So that is all that we have to discuss when it comes to this particular topic. I have framed a practice question for you people, so do practice this question. And with this, let's move on to the mains value addition. Now, beginning with the mains value addition article, a write-up has appeared in the Hindu on page number 10, which talks about the physical state when it comes to the states. Now, normally when it comes to the state government, whenever their fiscal health is not in good shape, we think that it is majorly a result of fiscal mismanagement. By fiscal mismanagement, what do I actually mean? I mean that majorly when it comes to the states, they are doing revenue expenditure, that is, they are making more expenditure when it comes to paying the salaries, paying pensions, interest on the market borrowings, and they are not undertaking the capital expenditure, which would enable the state to enhance the productive capacity in future. Now, the article points out the case study of Kerala, and it mentions that when it comes to states like Kerala and Tamil Nadu, who have invested heavily when it comes to the social sectors like health, education, agriculture and irrigation, and they have good human development indicators. Then also when it comes to these states, their fiscal health is not in good shape. Do you think it's because of the fiscal mismanagement, or it is because of the fact that they have ambitious development aspirations but they have limited fiscal capacity? Now, the article has tried to explain this particular question with the case study of Kerala. So when it comes to Kerala, it has pointed out that when it comes to Kerala, 1/5 of the expenditure the state is doing for paying the salaries, for paying pensions, for paying the interest when it comes to the market borrowings, and it is undertaking only 10% of capital expenditure. So that way, it is not able to add effectively when it comes to productive capacity of the economy. Now, why do you think it is the case? The article points out the reason being that Kerala has high development aspirations, but the problem is when it comes to the central government, they are giving less than 2% to Kerala when it comes to the central government tax devolution. Another problem which the article points out is that when it comes to the interest which the states have to pay when they do the market borrowing, it is quite high. It is in the band of 6.5% to 7.5%. It is approximately 0.75 or 1% point higher than the rate at which the union government is able to do the market borrowing. Another problem is when it comes to FRBM Act, we have placed limitations on the state's borrowing power. Now the article points out a good case study when it comes to China. The article says that the economic growth that we are seeing in case of China, it is because of the massive investment that has been undertaken by the local level government there. And when it comes to the local level government, how they are able to make such massive investment, they are able to get money through sale of local government bonds. They undertake off-budget borrowings. Then they are also provided with requisite fiscal transfer by the central government. But when it comes to India, states like Kerala, they are not getting enough amount of fiscal transfer because the Finance Commission give higher weightage to one of the parameter, that is income distance. Because of that parameter, states like UP and Bihar, they are able to get higher share of the devolution which is done from the central government. Another prominent thing which has been highlighted by the article is, if you look at the China, therein the local government there is able to get the market borrowing merely at an interest rate of 2%. So that needs to be replicated in case of India also. Only then we will be able to effectively tap the potential of the knowledge intensive sectors. Only then the state would be able to make great advancement when it comes to the emerging domain like semiconductors, AI, cloud computing, quantum technology, etc. So this case study of China, you can quote wherever you're writing an answer on fiscal federalism, that we need to replicate this model of China, wherein the states or the local government there is able to get the market borrowing at a very affordable interest rate, that is merely 2%. Whereas when it comes to India, they are able to get the interest rate at a higher rate. So that needs to be addressed. Now with this, let's move on to the prelim pointer segment. Now the first article is dealing with special intensive revision. This particular article is related to the polity section of your prelim syllabus. Now the article has pointed out a case study of R. Rajgopal, who was the former editor of the Telegraph. Now what is the entire case is that when it comes to R. Rajgopal, his passport was not renewed. He was not able to renew his passport this week. Why? Because his name was deleted when the special intensive revision was carried out this year in the state of West Bengal. Now, when it comes to the government in the West Bengal, they have stated that when it comes to availing the government services, you need to ensure that your name is there in the special intensive revision. The problem is that these people have already filed their appeal that my name is not there in the special intensive revision before the Supreme Court appointed tribunals. Now, until and unless these Supreme Court appointed tribunals have not given the verdict, how can you deny these individuals when it comes to the government services? Because when it comes to availing the government services, it could not be based on the fact that whether my name is appearing on the special intensive revision or not. And this was something which this was the reason why the Supreme Court last year upheld this entire exercise which is being carried out in different states. Therein, the Election Commission of India gave this argument that the revision of electoral rolls is not going to determine the citizenship. And it has given the directive to the electoral registration officers, as you can see, that wherever there is suspected that whether this individual is a foreign national or an Indian citizen, you need to refer to this particular matter to competent authority. Who is this competent authority? It is basically the Home Ministry, which has the power to decide that whether an individual is an Indian citizen or not. The Election Commission of India is not going to decide this particular thing. That is the reason the Supreme Court allowed the special intensive revision to be carried out in different states. And the Supreme Court stated that when it comes to Election Commission of India, it has the right to determine citizenship specifically when it comes to matters related to elections. But this, this entire exercise of special intensive revision that is being carried out, this would not affect the individual's entitlement to other aspects. Okay, this is not going to divest the individual's claim on citizenship. The problem is when it comes to West Bengal, now the government there has stated that if you want to avail government services, then you have to ensure that your name is there in the special intensive revision. So this is problematic. How the SIR could be affecting the welfare based approach when it comes to the government. Because when it comes to getting this passport also, it is up to me that what kind of ID proof I want to provide. It is up to me. I can provide Aadhaar also. I can provide PAN card also. So why when it comes to R. Rajgopal, even though the matter is still sub judice, it is before the Supreme Court appointed tribunal who has not given any final verdict, how on the basis of this thing that his name is not appearing in the special intensive revision, his passport was not renewed. Now, in this respect, what we need to know is certain facts related to special intensive revision. First is, what is intensive revision? So, intensive revision is a complete and fresh preparation of the electoral rolls, and herein the Election Commission would be carrying out house-to-house enumeration. Intensive revision is usually done when the electoral rolls are outdated or they are inaccurate. Now, another type of revision is summary revision. So it is a routine annual updating wherein the existing electoral rolls would be published as drafts and the citizens would be given this particular opportunity that you can claim for inclusion if you have attained the age of 18 plus years. You can delete someone's name who has died, or you can rectify any information which is related to you. No door-to-door visit would be carried out. Now, when it comes to the special revision, herein it is up to the Election Commission of India. It can go for intensive revision also, like it can carry out house-to-house enumeration, or it can go for the summary revision also. When it comes to the special revision, it is to be undertaken in special exceptional cases, wherein let's suppose in a particular area it was not covered and we don't have electoral roll with respect to that particular region. So in that case, special intensive revision could be carried out. Large scale errors are there in the electoral rolls. Okay, many of the people have died, many of the people have migrated, they are not ordinarily residing in that particular area. So large scale errors are there. Or if the legal or the political exigency situations are there. Now the intent of the special revision is that we have to exclude non-citizens and we have to include the citizens who have attained the age of 18 plus years and who are ordinarily residing in that particular constituency. Now, what is the legal and the constitutional framework based on which the ECI is carrying out the special intensive revision? So, Article 324 of the Indian Constitution gives the power to Election Commission of India for superintendence, direction and control of elections to Parliament as well as state legislatures. And reading of this particular article has been done by the Supreme Court in Mohinder Singh Gill versus Chief Election Commissioner of India case 1977, that if the law which has been made by the Parliament under Article 327 and if the law made by the state assemblies under 328 are silent on any particular aspect, then by virtue of this particular Article 324, Clause 1, ECI must act independently to ensure that the elections are carried out in a free and fair manner. Now, when it comes to the special intensive revision, it is provided under Section 21, Clause 3 of the RPA Act 1950. So, this is the legal framework under which the special intensive revision is being carried out. And we also have registration of electoral rules 1960, which specify the procedure for enrollment and revision. So these are the legal and the constitutional frameworks. Now the judgment that I was mentioning, that is of 2025 last year, that is Association of Democratic Reforms versus Election Commission of India, wherein the Supreme Court upheld the legality of special intensive revision which is being carried out in different states. Why the Supreme Court upheld this thing? First of all, in this particular judgment, the ECI made an argument that we are not going to determine the citizenship. Okay, it would be decided by the competent authority, that is the Home Ministry. And when it comes to the Supreme Court, it upheld the legality of the special intensive revision because it found out that the three requirements of proportionality rule are being upheld when it comes to this entire exercise. First is it fulfills the legitimate purpose. That means we have to, what is a legitimate purpose? That is to maintain a credible electoral roll. Okay, we have to ensure that the non-citizens' name are removed from the electoral roll, and the people who have attained the age of 18 plus and they are ordinarily residing in that particular constituency, their name needs to be incorporated. So it has a legitimate purpose, that is the accuracy of electoral rolls. So well and good. Another aspect of proportionality rule is that what means you are using to attain the end. Now the end was that electoral rolls needs to be accurate. What is the means that we are adopting? So Supreme Court says that the means that this Election Commission of India is using, that is also fine, okay, because the Election Commission of India is going for house to house enumeration. It is carrying out verification. It is doing the scrutiny, okay, with the help of its network of designated officers, and you also have the remedies available. If there is any error, you can report it to the Election Commission. So the means are also justified. Lastly, it is using the least restrictive option when it comes to Election Commission of India, because the statewide, the special intensive revision was proportionate to the scale of the problem. The Supreme Court in this particular judgment basically upheld this thing, that Election Commission of India does have the power to examine your citizenship with respect to the election related matters. But this does not mean that if your name does not appear in the special intensive revision, you would be devoid of the citizenship rights. That is not going to happen, because that is to be decided by the Supreme Court appointed tribunals, or it is to be decided by the Home Ministry. Okay, Election Commission of India is not the competent authority to do that. It can only look into the citizenship related dimension related to election matters. That is the reason the Supreme Court upheld this thing. That's all that we need to know with respect to this particular article. Let's move on to the next one. Now, after Iran and US have signed the Memorandum of Understanding with respect to opening the Strait of Hormuz, recently the Honorable Prime Minister has invited the Iran President for the BRICS meeting, which is being hosted by the India. So we have BRICS Leader Summit, which is going to be hosted by the India. This particular topic you can associate with the prelim section, that is international groupings. Now, when it comes to India, we are world's third largest importer of crude oil. This is according to the International Energy Agency. And India, after this closure of the Strait of Hormuz, we try to diversify our imports when it comes to the crude oil. So currently India is importing crude oil from across 40 countries. And that is the reason, as a result of this diversification, what has happened now, 70% of the crude imports are now coming from routes outside the Strait of Hormuz. So the imports of crude oil being done by India is not subjected to this West Asian crisis. Okay, earlier about 55% of the crude oil that was coming into India was passing through the Strait of Hormuz, and that was creating issues when it comes to the energy security. When it comes to the LPG, India is the second largest importer of LPG, and India imports 60% of the LPG what we are consuming in India. The problem is how this LPG import is well connected with the West Asian crisis is 90% of our LPG import passes through the Strait of Hormuz. So when it comes to crude oil, we have been able to diversify our import sources, but when it comes to LPG, we are still dependent upon the West Asian countries. Like majority of the LPG, as you can see, it comes from UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia and Oman. And when it comes to importing the LPG, it would be passing through the Strait of Hormuz. That is the reason the price of LPG cylinders have yet not come down. Okay. Now, moving forward, when it comes to BRICS, you need to make note of certain prelim facts related to this particular grouping. So this term BRIC was first coined by the economist Jim O'Neill in 2001 to designate the group of emerging markets, that is Brazil, Russia, India and China. So the group began formal cooperation at the 2006 G8 Outreach Summit, and the first official summit was held in Russia way back in 2009. Therein you have the four founding partners, that is Brazil, Russia, India and China. So they adopted the acronym, that is BRIC. S was added in 2010 when South Africa became a member. Now recently, you must have come across that the membership of this BRIC grouping has expanded. So in 2024, more members got added. So the members are Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran and UAE. When it comes to Indonesia, it has joined in 2025 and it has become the first Southeast Asian member when it comes to BRICS grouping. Now, in certain places, you must be seeing that Saudi Arabia is also said that it is a member. But the problem is when it comes to Saudi Arabia, it has accepted the membership of BRIC, but it has yet not formalized it. Okay. Whereas when it comes to Argentina, earlier it stated that it want to be a part of this particular grouping, but later on it opted out. Okay, so Argentina is not a member of BRIC. Nowadays, we are using the acronym BRIC Plus to basically incorporate these additional members. Now, when it comes to BRIC, we have the Sherpa system, which is basically, Sherpas are basically the designated leaders who are going to represent their country within the BRIC bloc, and they will be serving as the primary channel of communication among the BRIC nations. Now, certain more points that you need to know with respect to BRIC, because this year India has the presidency. Now, when it comes to the India's BRICS chairmanship, we are guided by the theme of building for resilience, innovation, cooperation and sustainability. Why you need to make note of this particular theme? Because this year prelims, you must have seen this, that now UPSC is asking the specific themes of different grouping in a particular year. So you need to make note of this particular theme. When it comes to India, we are being guided by this theme, that is building for resilience, innovation, cooperation and sustainability. Now, when it comes to resilience, it talks about strengthening the global supply chain, because there is huge volatility and there is uncertainty across the globe. So resilient supply chain needs to be put in place. Then we need to focus upon innovation, basically exploiting the emerging domains, that is AI, machine learning, cloud computing, etc. Then there needs to be cooperation among the different countries. Only then we can put in place resilient supply chain. And we need to come up with people-centric partnerships. And lastly, we are guided by the idea of sustainability, wherein we are saying that we need to focus upon the climate action, because climate change is a reality. Every country is getting impacted by the extreme weather events. We need to focus upon the green finance, that basically making sure that the loans are being provided for renewable energy projects. And we need to focus upon energy transition. We need to make a smooth transition from non-renewable energy sources to renewable energy sources. Now, recently, under the chairmanship of India, this year only, majority of BRICS meetings have carried out. So you could be asked a question in this respect. So when you talk about the National Security Advisor meeting, that was carried out in New Delhi. When you talk about the energy related meeting, that was carried out in Gurugram, Haryana. Culture related meeting was carried out in Varanasi. An MSME related meeting was carried out in Agra. And agriculture related meeting was carried out in Indore, Madhya Pradesh. That's all that we need to know when it comes to this particular topic. Let's move on to the next one. Now, recently, yesterday, you must have come across that the Index of Industrial Production data set has been released. And the current data set points out that the industrial performance is good as compared to the past 5 months, whatever figures that we are getting when it comes to the Index of Industrial Production. Now, questions are being raised when it comes to this particular data point. Why? Because the index of 8 core industries, which form approximately 40% of this IIP, that has not performed well. Then how come this IIP has performed well? And another question is being raised because of this West Asian crisis. All the other countries are not performing well. How come India is able to perform well? So let's look into all these questions. This particular topic you can associate with the economy section of your prelim syllabus. Now, as you can see in this particular data point, that in the last 5 months, as you can see that the index of industrial production has performed well, okay, as compared to these last 5 months. Currently it is 5.1%. Now, the questions are being raised that when it comes to other countries, their industrial output is going down. How come in the midst of West Asian crisis, India's industrial production has performed well? So that is one question. Then another argument that has been given is that it could be because of revival of the domestic consumption. The counter argument that has been given by the experts is that the domestic demand is not doing well. Why? The experts are pointing to GST revenues. GST revenues have grown at a very slower pace if you look at the last 6 months data. So then the question arises, then how come the industries are performing well? The expert says that it is because of the improvement in the merchandise exports which India is doing. Okay, so we have witnessed a 4-year high in April when it comes to the merchandise exports. So that is the reason the industries are performing well in India, but the domestic demand or the domestic consumption is not doing well. This raises concerns. Why? Because when it comes to the consumption expenditure, it accounts for 60% of India's GDP. So now if this IIP is giving us a good picture, it is because of increased exports and not because of increased domestic consumption, then it is a cause of concern, because Indian GDP is a consumption-led. Indian economy is consumption-led economy. So if the consumption expenditure is going down in future, it would get reflected when it comes to the IIP also, and it would get reflected in the GDP reports also, or the GDP data point also. Now another concern that has been highlighted by the expert is, how come the IIP is giving us a better picture when the index of 8 core industries, okay, which account for almost 40% of this IIP index, herein the performance is not that much great. As you can see, it has grew at its second lowest rate in 21 months, okay, in May. So if this index of 8 core industries, this is going down, how come IIP is giving us a better picture? That is another question being asked. So now the experts point out that it could be the case because when it comes to the base year of this index of 8 core industries, that has not been changed. But when it comes to the index of industrial production, we have changed the base year. So maybe because of that, we are able to get a better realistic picture of the economy. Now another change that has been done in the methodology by the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, which comes up with this IIP, is that it has abandoned the use of WPI, that is Wholesale Price Index, and instead of using WPI, we are now going to use PPI, that is Producer Price Index. Now what is this Producer Price Index and how it is different from WPI? Now when it comes to this producer price index, it separately tracks the prices which the producers pay for the inputs and the prices they receive for their outputs. It excludes the additional costs like the transportation costs and the indirect taxes. That is the reason it is better as compared to WPI. And another reason being, when it comes to this PPI, it incorporates both goods and services. Whereas when it comes to WPI, it used to exclude the services sector. Okay, that is the reason we are now using this PPI, which gives us a clear picture that what producers are paying for the inputs and what they are actually getting. That means what is the change in the prices at the producer level. Now, let's look into that, what all changes we have made when it comes to this index of industrial production recently. So when it comes to this IIP, what is the relevance? It captures the industrial activity in the economy on a monthly basis. So IIP would be coming on a monthly basis and it is released by NSO, which functions under the MOSPI ministry, that is Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. So it is a high frequency indicator because it is coming on a monthly basis. So this also tells us that how our GDP figure would look like, because GDP figures would be coming on a quarterly basis. Now, as I told you, the base year of IIP has been updated. So previously it was 11-12. Now it has been updated to 22-23, which is also the current base year of GDP also. Now, we have expanded the coverage. So earlier, only manufacturing, mining, electricity, infrastructure, capital goods and consumer goods were covered. Now we are covering other sectors also. For example, gas supply, water supply, sewerage and waste management activities are also being covered. Then we are giving a clear picture when it comes to mining. So it would be giving separate figures with respect to minor minerals and with respect to rare earth minerals. So better sectoral representation would be there. And it would be giving a better picture when it comes to the electricity generation. So it would be giving a electricity index which would separately be tracking the generation of electricity which is being done by the renewable sources and what is the electricity being generated by the non-renewable sources. So a clear granular picture would be in front of us. That's all that we need to know with respect to this particular topic. Let's move on to the next topic. Now, the last topic of today's analyst is related to the remittances. This particular topic you can associate with the economy section of your prelim syllabus. Now, what the Ministry of Finance has pointed out that although the West Asian crisis is going on, but amidst this crisis also, the remittances have been stable when it comes to India. Rather, we have witnessed a 70% surge in the remittances which are coming from the Gulf countries if you look at the data point and if you compare it with the last year figures. Now, let's try and understand it in a better manner. So when it comes to the current account, so remittances are a part of your current account, as you can see. In current account, you have the trade in goods. The trade in goods is referred to be trade in visibles. That is something you can see that, okay, it is crossing the borders. And when you talk about the invisibles, it includes your trade in services and it includes your transfer payments. So when it comes to India, usually we have a current account deficit. Why? Because we are not a major exporter when it comes to goods. Although when it comes to services, we perform better. Okay. But when it comes to current account, it is usually in deficit, and that deficit is actually reduced by the remittances, the majority of the remittances that we get. Now, if you look at the recent Niti Aayog 8th edition of Trade Watch quarterly report, it points out that India is the world's 8th largest service exporter in 2025. I told you right now that India is a major player when it comes to exporting the services, but we don't perform that much great when it comes to the trade in goods. And as you can see, why we have this current account deficit? Because in financial year 25-26, as you can see, exports grew at a rate of 4.2%, but the imports grew at a faster rate, that is 6.5%. So when your imports would be higher than the export, obviously what you will be witnessing? You will be witnessing current account deficit. And this deficit is actually reduced via remittances. Let's note down that what the economic survey of this year has to say. So the economic survey of this year clearly points it out that India has retained its position of world's largest recipient of remittances, and India has maintained this position since 2008. So if you look at the remittances that we got in financial year 25, it is around $135 billion. And because of this stable remittances that we get from advanced economies like US, UK, as well as the Gulf countries, this is the reason that the current account deficit is reduced. As you can see, in financial year 25, the current account deficit was around 1.3% of the GDP because of the stable remittances and because we are performing great in the services. The current account deficit in the financial year 26 is around 0.8% of the GDP. So it is less than 1% of the GDP. And a question might be asked that which are the major countries from where we are getting the remittances. So if you go by the RBI survey, which tracks the remittances that India got between 2016-17 to 23-24, the top 5 countries from where India get the remittances is US, then it is followed by UAE, then UK, Saudi Arabia and Singapore. That's all that we need to know in today's Analyst. Quiz will be coming right up next, so don't forget to practice the quiz and please check your knowledge. Till then, keep smiling, keep learning. Have a great day, all of you.